My name is Clara Bennett, and there was a time when love was all Ethan and I needed. We were 24, young, foolish, and certain that the world would bend for us if we simply wanted it enough. We lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a fading Boston neighborhood, the kind of place where the paint peeled like dried petals and the radiator coughed through winter nights. Yet somehow those nights felt rich. We had nothing but each other and a head full of dreams. Ethan used to sketch plans on napkins, ideas for a tech startup, designs for a sleek app that would change how small businesses manage inventory. I worked at a local cafe, serving lattes to office workers who looked through me. Every payday, I'd slip half my tips into a jar labeled someday, and we'd laugh about how it was our future travel fund. He'd come home late from freelance coding gigs, exhausted but smiling. I'd warm leftover soup, and we'd sit on the floor eating, joking about the life we'd build. Those moments were real. I can't rewrite them. He loved me then. I could see it in how he brushed my hair off my face when I fell asleep on the couch. But ambition has a way of whispering louder than love. The first time Ethan talked about networking events, his voice changed. Smoother, more practiced. "Clara," he said, buttoning his only blazer, "these people could invest in us. I can't keep living paycheck to paycheck." I smiled and told him to go, proud of his drive. I believed in him with a loyalty that felt holy. I didn't notice how quickly his dreams became his alone. The months blurred. I'd wait up for him, dinner turning cold. He'd stumble in, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't his, tossing words like branding and venture capital into the air as if they were promises. I'd nod, pretending to understand, though my world was still measured in coffee shifts and rent due dates. One night, I asked if he'd eaten. He sighed. "Clara, you don't get it. You're still thinking small." The sentence sliced quietly through the room. I laughed to cover the sting. "Small. I'm just worried, Ethan. We've barely seen each other." He kissed my forehead like a parent pacifying a child. "You'll see, babe. When this takes off, you'll thank me." I told myself it was just stress. Success was coming. Surely it would bring us closer. But it didn't. When his startup finally attracted investors, he started dressing sharper, speaking with an accent that wasn't quite his, and spending weekends at business retreats. The Ethan who once whispered dreams against my shoulder now whispered nothing at all. Our home became quiet, too quiet. He began to criticize how I looked. "You could try dressing more like Victoria," he once murmured after an event, mentioning a new investor's daughter. "She carries herself well." I looked down at my thrift store dress, the one I'd ironed for an hour, and smiled weakly. "I'll try." Inside something wilted. Then came the dinners I wasn't invited to, the conferences I didn't hear about until after. He said he didn't want me to feel out of place among that crowd, as if love had a social class. I remember our 3rd anniversary. I spent all week saving for a modest dinner at the Italian place around the corner. He never showed. When he finally came home past midnight, he didn't apologize. He just said, "Clara, we need to talk." My hands trembled before he even spoke the words. He'd met someone, Victoria Hale, the investor's daughter, educated abroad, refined, perfect. He said he admired her vision. "Vision," I repeated, voice barely steady. "It's not what you think," he said, though his eyes confessed everything. "You're comfortable, Clara. But I need to move forward. You deserve someone simple, someone who wants what you want." I laughed then, a sharp sound that startled us both. "And what do I want, Ethan?" He looked away. "You want safety. I want more." He moved out a week later. The night he left, I stood by the window, watching his Uber's taillights fade. My world, once painted in warm hues of us, drained to grayscale. People said I should be angry, but I was numb. Days stretched thin, filled with silence and the ghost of his laughter echoing in corners. Rent became harder. The cafe hours felt endless. Rachel, my best friend, kept urging me to leave Boston to start over. But leaving felt like admitting I had nothing left worth staying for. So I stayed. And in that staying, I discovered something small but stubborn inside me, a flicker of defiance. I refused to vanish into heartbreak. I took extra shifts, saved every cent. At night, I watched free online business courses, my eyes burning from the screen's blue light. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I only knew I wouldn't let my story end with being his poor ex-wife. Ethan's name began to appear in magazines. Forbes Under 30 Tech Innovator of the Year. Each headline was another needle, but also a strange kind of fuel. He'd built an empire. I would build myself. That winter I signed up for a local entrepreneurship program. It was there I met Daniel Brooks, a soft-spoken mentor who noticed the fire behind my exhaustion. He listened to my half-formed idea about sustainable home decor and said, "It's not crazy. It's honest. Let's see what you can do." No one had said let's in a long time. Looking back now, that was the night the old version of me began to crumble, and something steadier, quieter started to rise. Love had failed me, yes. But willpower was patient, and it waited for me to notice it. I still wore my wedding ring for months after the divorce papers came, not out of hope but as a reminder. I'd once believed love could feed us. Now I was learning how to feed myself. The city lights outside my window blurred with the first snow of December. I whispered to the empty room, "You'll see me again, Ethan." Not as a plea, as a promise. Success has a way of rewriting people. Ethan didn't just change. He reinvented himself, erasing the version that had once held my hand through unpaid bills and shared noodles. I watched him from a distance, as his name began appearing in news articles and tech podcasts. Visionary, they called him. A mind that turned scarcity into empire. I used to trace those headlines with my finger, half in disbelief, half in grief. He'd done it. He'd reached the life we dreamed of, but I wasn't in the picture anymore. Months passed. The little apartment lost its echo of him. I sold our old furniture, one piece at a time, until the rooms looked less like memory and more like space to breathe. Rachel kept reminding me, "Clara, survival first. Healing comes after." So I worked. Daniel helped me refine my business plan. He believed in my idea of using recycled materials to craft high-end home decor. Mirrors from reclaimed glass, shelves made from old barnwood. "You're selling a story," he said. "A second chance for forgotten things." The words mirrored my life so closely they hurt. I poured myself into the work. My apartment turned into a mini workshop. Glue, sketches, and invoices replaced tears. When I finally launched my online store, Second Story Home, it made a few small sales. Then more. Then enough. Reviews trickled in. People loved the craftsmanship, the authenticity. Daniel connected me with small interior designers in New York and Chicago, and slowly, something miraculous happened. My pain began to turn into profit. But success, even quiet success, doesn't erase scars. Sometimes late at night, I'd see Ethan's face on television interviews. His smile looked practiced, his laughter hollow. Still, part of me wondered if he ever thought about me, about the woman who once carried his dreams when they were too heavy for him alone. 2 years passed like that. Me growing, him shining brighter in the public eye. Then one afternoon, as sunlight painted golden streaks across my studio, I received an envelope. No return address. Just my name written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. My pulse quickened. Inside was a thick ivory card bordered in gold. The union of Ethan Miller and Victoria Hale. You are cordially invited to celebrate their wedding at the Hale Estate, Connecticut. My first reaction was disbelief. Then anger. Then something stranger, amusement. After everything, he wanted me there. To parade his new, wealthy life in front of the woman he once called too simple. Rachel was furious when I showed her. "You can't go, Clara. He's doing this to rub it in your face." "I know," I said quietly. "Then why would you even consider it?" I looked at the invitation again, its expensive paper glinting in the light. Because maybe it's time he sees who I've become. She sighed. Just promise me if you go for yourself, not for him. He nodded. For myself. The following weeks felt surreal. I hadn't thought about what I'd wear to impress anyone in years, but now I found myself carefully selecting an outfit. A tailored navy dress, pearl earrings, hair swept into a neat chignon. I wanted elegance without arrogance. I wanted to walk into that room and let silence speak for me. The Hale estate was a place I'd only ever seen in magazines. Massive gardens, marble floors, chandeliers that glittered like constellations. As my hired driver pulled up, I felt my heart hammer against my ribs. Guests in designer suits milled about, their laughter spilling like champagne. When I stepped out of the car, a hush followed, subtle but real. Eyes turned. Someone whispered, "Is that Clara Bennett?" I walked past them slowly, my heels echoing on the stone path. The afternoon sun caught my dress just right. I didn't rush. I'd learned grace takes its time. Inside I found him. Ethan Miller. The man who once couldn't sleep without my hand in his. He stood near the grand staircase, champagne in hand, surrounded by investors and polished friends. He looked older, sharper, more sculpted than kind. When his eyes met mine, the world seemed to pause. For a brief second, shock flared in his expression before he smoothed it away with a brittle smile. "Clara," he said, voice strained but civil. "You came." "Of course," I replied, my tone calm. "Wouldn't miss it." He glanced over my shoulder as if checking who I'd arrived with. I offered him nothing but poise. Victoria appeared moments later, stunning in ivory lace. She was the embodiment of everything he thought he wanted. Status, sophistication, social elevation. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "You must be Clara. Ethan's told me so much about you." "I'm sure he has," I said, shaking her hand gently. "Congratulations. You make a lovely couple." Her smile flickered for a moment, perhaps sensing the undertone. "Thank you," she murmured. Ethan cleared his throat. "Clara runs a small business now, right?" The condescension in small was unmistakable. I smiled faintly. "Yes, second-story home. We've just partnered with Hale Interiors. Do you know them?" Victoria blinked. "That's my father's company." I nodded softly. "Then he must have mentioned me. He reached out last month, said he admired my designs. We're collaborating on a sustainable luxury line next quarter." The silence that followed was exquisite. Ethan's face paled slightly, and Victoria's surprise was genuine. Around us, the chatter seemed to hush, curiosity rippling through the guests. "That's impressive," Victoria managed. "Thank you," I said, eyes never leaving Ethan's. "It's been a journey." I excused myself gracefully, letting them stand in their shock. Each step I took away from them felt like reclaiming air I hadn't breathed in years. Later, as music swelled and laughter returned to the room, I slipped out onto the terrace. The night sky stretched wide above me, stars scattered like blessings. Daniel had once said, "Success isn't revenge, Clara. It's restoration." Standing there, I finally understood. I didn't come to humiliate him. I came to prove to myself that losing someone cruel wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. Inside, I could hear their voices again, subdued, uncertain. I let a small smile bloom and whispered into the cool night air. "We're even now." The wind carried it away, soft and sure, and for the first time I felt entirely free. The night after Ethan's wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not because I regretted going, but because something inside me had shifted, like a door finally closing after years of creaking open. His stunned face replayed in my mind, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Instead, there was calm, almost peace. The next morning, sunlight spilled into my apartment, landing on my sketchbook. Pages filled with designs I'd made over the years. Concepts I never had the courage to show anyone. Waited for me. For the first time I looked at them not as a hobby, but as blueprints for the life I wanted. I dove into work. My collaboration with Hale Interiors turned out to be transformative. Their platform elevated my brand beyond anything I could have achieved alone. Designers from London and Toronto reached out. My email became a flood of opportunities. But even as my business expanded, I made sure to stay true to what started it all, creating beauty from what was once discarded. Daniel, always calm and deliberate, guided me through the chaos. He taught me how to read contracts, how to protect my name and my art. He had this habit of saying, "Clara, never apologize for being the storm that rebuilt itself." I wrote that on a sticky note and pinned it to my wall. By spring, Second Story Home was no longer a modest studio project. I'd moved into a proper workspace in downtown Boston, all exposed brick and tall windows. I hired a small team, 3 women who reminded me of myself when I'd been afraid to try. We built something real, something lasting. But success brings new lessons. The higher you rise, the quieter the applause becomes. Some nights, exhaustion crept in, whispering that maybe Ethan had been right, that I'd never fit into the world of polished ambition. But then I'd think of all the customers who sent me photos of their homes, proud to own something made by hand, something with history. And I'd keep going. Year passed. And 2. My brand became synonymous with sustainable luxury, featured in design magazines I used to flip through while waiting tables. Interviews followed, radio, podcasts, even a TV feature on women entrepreneurs redefining American craftsmanship. The producer asked, "Clara, what drives you?" I smiled into the microphone. "Second chances," I said simply. Daniel was by my side through it all. There were moments when I caught his gaze lingering too long, soft and full of something I wasn't ready to name. I wasn't sure if it was love or admiration, but it warmed me nonetheless. Still, my heart wasn't searching for romance. It was learning how to belong to itself. Then came the invitation that would change everything again. Richard Hale, Victoria's father, called me personally. "Clara," he said, "I'm retiring. I want you to head the new sustainable division. You've built something extraordinary, and I want you to expand it under our global label." For a moment I couldn't speak. It was everything I'd worked for. Recognition, growth, validation. But it was also poetic. The father of the woman who once replaced me was now entrusting me with his legacy. "I'm honored, Mr. Hale," I said finally. "Let's make something the world will remember." The new role came with travel, meetings in London, and endless introductions to people who'd only known the polished version of me. I never corrected them when they assumed I'd always been this successful. My past wasn't something I was ashamed of, it was just mine to keep. During a gala in New York I saw Ethan again. He approached cautiously, his posture stiffer, his confidence dulled by the subtle wear of time. He was still with Victoria, though the spark between them seemed dim. "Clara," he greeted, voice uncertain. I turned, smiling politely. "Ethan, it's been a while. I've seen your interviews," he said. "You've done incredibly well." "Thank you," I replied. "It's been a journey." He looked away, his jaw tightening. I didn't imagine you'd end up here." I tilted my head. "Neither did I. But that's the beauty of falling apart. It gives you space to rebuild." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening with something I couldn't read. "Regret, maybe. You deserved better than how I treated you." The admission caught me off guard. I exhaled softly. We both did what we thought we needed to. I just learned from it faster. For a long moment, we stood there in silence, surrounded by the low hum of champagne conversations. Finally he said, "You know, I thought I invited you to that wedding to show you what you'd lost. Turns out, it showed me what I'd thrown away." I didn't answer. Some things didn't need words. I just smiled gently and walked away, leaving him standing among people who suddenly felt like strangers. That night, in my hotel room, I looked out over the city lights, the skyline glittering like 1,000 promises. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who cried herself to sleep in a tiny apartment, believing her story was over. I wished I could tell her that heartbreak was not an ending but a refinement. Life had a strange sense of poetry. The very man who'd humiliated me had unknowingly propelled me into my purpose. The pain he caused became the soil from which my success grew. Months later, when Richard Hale officially stepped down, he handed me the keys to his office and said, "You're the future now, Clara. Lead with heart, not ego." And I did. The launch of our global line was a triumph. My designs appeared in homes from Vancouver to London, celebrated for their authenticity. During the press conference, I ended my speech with one line that summed up everything I'd lived through. Beauty isn't in perfection, it's in what's been broken and made whole again. Applause filled the room, and somewhere in the crowd, I imagined Ethan hearing those words and understanding. For me, though, it was never about proving him wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right, that kindness, resilience, and quiet strength were enough to build an empire of their own. The woman I'd become wasn't defined by the man who left her, but by the courage to stay standing when he did. And in that, I found the purest form of victory. It was 3 years after that gala when the past decided to find its way back to me. By then, my company had expanded to Europe, and I'd been splitting my time between Boston and London. Life had a rhythm now, a quiet, steady confidence that I never thought I'd own. One foggy morning, my assistant buzzed into my office. "Clara, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." I frowned. Did he give a name? Pause. Ethan Morris. For a second, my heart didn't know whether to race or stop. But I'd learned to master that kind of shock. I simply said, "Send him in." When he entered, I barely recognized him. His once crisp suit hung a little loose, and there were fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He still carried that air of control, but it was cracked at the edges, the way porcelain breaks but still tries to hold its shape. "Clara," he said quietly, his voice softer than I remembered. "You look incredible." "Thank you," I replied, gesturing to a seat. "What brings you here?" He sat, clasping his hands together. "I'm not here for business. He exhaled, the words catching. "I needed to see you." I folded my arms. "After all this time?" He nodded. "Victoria and I are separated." The words hung in the air like dust after an explosion. I said nothing. He continued, almost as if rehearsed. "Things fell apart slowly. She wanted a life that looked perfect, not one that was. We built everything on appearances. And when that cracks," he trailed off, looking at me. "I thought success would fix the emptiness. But it only made it louder." I looked at him, really looked. For years I had imagined this moment, the apology, the regret. Yet now that it was here, it didn't feel like triumph. Felt quiet. Human. "Ethan," I said softly, "you don't owe me explanations. We were two different people trying to live one story. It was bound to fall apart." He shook his head. "No, I owe you everything. You believed in me when no one did, and I threw that away for something shiny and shallow. And when I saw what you became," he smiled faintly, "I realized I'd mistaken your gentleness for weakness." I could have said something sharp, something victorious. But revenge had long lost its flavor. Instead I said, "You didn't break me, Ethan. You built me, just not in the way you thought." He looked down, nodding slowly. "I deserve that." After a moment he asked, "Is there someone in your life now?" Daniel's face flickered in my mind. His quiet laughter, his patience, his presence. "There is," I said. "Someone who never tried to dim my light." Ethan swallowed, managing a faint smile. "Then I'm glad. You deserve to be seen." We sat in silence for a while. Then he stood. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the wedding, not for the breakup, but for not seeing who you were when it mattered." He nodded. "And I'm grateful. Because if you had, I might never have found myself." He smiled sadly, turned and walked out of my office. I watched him go, his figure fading into the hallway, and felt something lift from my chest, something that had been there for years. That evening, Daniel stopped by my apartment with takeout and wine. "You look peaceful," he said, studying me. "I saw Ethan today," I admitted. His brow lifted slightly, but he didn't look jealous, just curious. "And how do you feel?" Smiled. "Free." He nodded, then raised his glass. "To freedom, then." We clinked glasses, laughter spilling into the quiet hum of the city outside. Months later, Daniel and I took a trip to Italy for a design conference. We stood on a balcony overlooking Florence, golden light spilling over the rooftops. He turned to me and said, "You know, I've been in love with you since the day you redesigned my office." I laughed softly. "That was years ago." "Exactly," he said. "It took you long enough to notice." And just like that, the love I once begged for arrived. Not in grand gestures, but in steady presence, in partnership, in peace. By the time we launched our European collection, my name was on billboards and magazines, but more importantly, it was etched into the lives I touched through my work. Women sent letters saying my story gave them courage to start again, to rebuild after heartbreak, after failure. And in every interview, when they asked what my secret was, I said the same thing. Forgiveness. That's where real power begins. Because healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about walking through it without flinching. And I'd finally done that. I walk away from the past. I realize that life doesn't owe us closure, and people don't owe us validation. What matters is the strength we carry quietly within, the courage to rise even when the world doubts us, and the grace to shine without dimming anyone else. I've learned that heartbreak is not a verdict. It's a teacher. The woman I once was, timid and uncertain, has grown into someone who owns her story, her choices, and her destiny. And as for Ethan or anyone who thought they could define me, I only smile. Because the most powerful triumph is the one lived quietly, beautifully, and fully, without needing to be witnessed.